Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. All right. Happy Chinese New Year, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Happy Chinese New Year.
I
wasn't ready for that.
And surprised you.
I was expecting Happy Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, and Puxatawny Phil says that we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter, and with this ice storm bearing down upon us, I can really see that. But then the guy out in New York says, no, we're going to have spring soon. So, you know, as far as groundhogs go, weather prediction can be not quite a certainty.
You know, do you think it matters where the groundhog is from? So the New York guy, right? The New York groundhog says no on the extended winter.
Yeah, he said no. He said spring's coming early.
I feel like they got a lot of winter already, so maybe that's a good thing for them. I mean, they got feet and feet of snow up there.
Yeah, that was a bad storm. I was thankful it didn't hit us that hard. And I know a lot of people are worried about this ice coming, and I was seeing some chatter on the Google Tubes about how to keep your high tunnel from collapsing from the weight of the snow. And, you know, you got to keep a lot of it's in the design of the high tunnel, and that's something you need to plan for right up front. Those wider high tunnels are better for more southern climates where you're not going to have a lot of snow load. But up in the northern parts, you want the gabled roof or a steeper slope on top of your tunnel so that the snow can slide off. And then you're going to be looking at trying to keep it swept off, but also there's discussion, and I'm not sure which is the best, but there's discussion about keeping your tunnel inflated with the interior air to help increase the heat of that outside layer of plastic. But there's also debate on to let the air out so that the heat from inside can better get to that outside layer of plastic. So I'm not going to weigh in on which is better because I don't know and I haven't had the time to research that. But basically keeping the weight off. Once the ice has gotten on, it's going to grab onto the snow. So you're going to have to do a little bit extra work to keep that ice off, but make sure that you are using a tool that is covered with a soft edge so that you're not poking a hole in your plastic and causing greater problems.
At a certain point, you're going to need like a high pressure low tunnel. No, just no, but honestly, I just want to think a little bit beyond the tunnel itself.
So started off talking about high tunnels, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up, not only because of the snow load danger, was because a lot of places are starting seedlings now. We have a WVU extension calendar, if some of you are familiar with it. And if you're not, you've got to go get one. They're great calendars. And you can get them at any of your WVU extension offices. And it's free. Yay! So on the month of February for the WVU extension calendar, there's a whole list of different activities that you can do. And a lot of the activities that are on February are getting things started. Now, we're not talking tomatoes. Don't start your tomatoes yet. But you can start looking at seeding lettuce or broccoli. Your leafy greens, those are great to do right now to get them started.
Yeah, and these calendars are great. They really just keep you prepared and keep you focused. So you look at them, they're a great reminder. You're not jumping the gun and you're staying on track. They're really useful, Karen. They're free, but they are highly sought after, so might not be the easiest thing to get one right away.
Right. And so if you are in the Upper Ohio Valley region, I know that we have some here at the Ohio County Extension Office that you're welcome to get it. But if you are closer to another office, check with them first. We did a show a little while back, was it last week or the week before, on root diseases. And one of the things we had talked about was making sure that you're starting with clean soil or starter medium. Regardless of what you're using, it should be free of any potential fungal pathogens or diseases so that you're not pre-infecting your plants, right? And so today we wanted to go a little bit more into what types of diseases that you might expect to see on your leafy greens and herbs, because that's really what we're going to start to be working with here in the immediate near future. And I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but there's this awesome newsletter called eGrow. It's a high tunnel and greenhouse focused newsletter from a myriad of different extension services. And if you are growing indoors or undercover, it's really an essential read. There's a lot of great tips, and it's quick and easy. It's not like something that you're going to have to digest hard. It's a nice extension publication, meaning it's digestible. So Neil Matson and Marguerite Doherty did a great write-up of common diseases of hydroponic leafy greens and herbs in the eGrow newsletter, and they've given us permission to share their write-up here because it is just so well done. I really wanted to just go through it. So we're going to start off and we're going to talk about Pythium Root Rot, Powdery Mildew, Botrytis Blight, Basal Downy Mildew, and Scleretina Blight. And you want to make sure that you're confirming the diagnosis of what you're looking at so you know that you're using the right treatment, because not all treatments will help with all problems. So make sure you get the proper diagnosis from the local plant pathology lab. I can talk today, really.
And if you're not familiar with eGrow, it's the letter E, G-R-O. There's no W there. So
right.
It's E-G-R-O.
Yep.
So that might help a little bit as far as trying to find it if you're interested and if you like the information.
Yeah, and if you want to subscribe to it, you can just search it online and get a copy, and you can subscribe to it. It's a free newsletter, as so many of our extension things are. You know, that's where your tax dollars for education, some of them at least, go, is into extension. So please continue to support education politically, because it does help us help you. All right, so that's off. We're going to talk about Pythium Root Rot now.
And I think we did touch on this one because last time we did talk a lot about root rots, and Pythium root rot is a big one.
Yes, it is. And so we're going to go over it again.
Yes, yeah. And again, you know, there's a lot of sanitation things that you can do as well as the fungal sprays. But let's go ahead and start with the commonly affected crops here for Pythium root rot. Spinach, arugula, basil, and lettuce. All very popular things to grow. And
all things you're going to be starting soon. So the signs and symptoms with Pythium would be brown or discolored roots or poor overall rooting. So you don't have enough roots. The outer part of the root is going to slough off. Remember, we talked about that inner portion or a rat tail remaining behind on the last show. But also the leaves will wilt or yellow, but that's mostly due to poor nutrient uptake. So we talk a lot about overwatering and underwatering, and overwatering is a bigger problem. And Pythium is one of the reasons overwatering is a bigger problem.
Those are some of the symptoms. And sanitation control measures. Sanitation is going to be one of the most important things to do to prevent a lot of these root rots and these fungal diseases, especially in a greenhouse setting where you have high moisture. Usually you have a lot of water. So for sanitation, you always want to inspect the material, make sure it's clean, healthy, good root system. Use foot baths with active sanitizing agent for all workers entering the greenhouse. That's kind of a biosecurity measure, especially for large-scale greenhouse production. Sanitize tools. That's something that the small producer and a large producer both can really make a difference there as far as spreading the disease from one plant to the other. Test your water source. And if you have contaminated water, dirty water, don't use it. That water typically gets recycled a lot, and any kind of dirty water, diseased water will easily spread. And also for Pythium specifically, use a chiller to decrease temperature to 72 degrees. Warmer temperatures seem to propagate Pythium more.
Right. And, you know, you think about these things and they're like, oh, I'm just a small grower. It doesn't matter to me. But smaller growers take a big hit, a much bigger hit when they lose a crop, because a larger grower can fluctuate financial balance sheets and things like that. But you, as a small grower, these things are still really, really important to you. And you think, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't do this. One of the things I saw at a hydroponic greenhouse here in West Virginia that I got to visit was right outside the door to the greenhouse. They have a little hallway, and they have a bunch of hooks where they have all of the aprons that are worn in the greenhouse. So when you go in the greenhouse, you put the apron on. When you go out of the greenhouse, you take the apron off. There was also a place to put shoes. So there was a space for greenhouse shoes and a space for non-greenhouse shoes. And they kept them really separate. There's a bathroom right there, which was really handy. But it gave the staff an opportunity to get their hands washed, make sure that they're not bringing any contaminants that could infect the plants or food safety risks that could affect humans down the road. So these are great, simple steps that you can put in place. Another place I went, they just had Crocs for everybody, right? So they just had a pile of Crocs because they're so easy to disinfect, right? You can just drop them in a soak tank and weight them down, and then you can, move on. So they're easy to put on and off. So think about those things as far as how that would work for your area. And if you have a small greenhouse, whether it be hydroponic or getting ready to plant in soil, you still need to make sure that you're taking those biosecurity steps to keep any potential diseases outside, not bring them inside.
That's right. And one of the things that we always talk about with fungicides is you got to understand that fungicides are going to be preventative.
Mm-hmm.
What the way fungus pathogens really damage a plant is they make those hyphae and they burrow into the cells and they replicate and destroy the cells from inside out. And those fungicides really prevent that penetration of the hyphae into the cells, so it keeps the plant healthy, because those fungal spores are usually there. They're very hard to sanitize. But so that fungicide is mainly preventative, and that sanitation is really what's going to keep the heavy spore load off your plants.
Right. And so for Pythium, your preventative stage is at seeds, or at the seeding stage. So when they're still wrapped up in that little protective shell, that's when you're going to be applying your fungal prevention steps for Pythium.
Yes. So again, don't overwater, watch for soggy medium. Some of the things you can use for Pythium Root Rot, and that might vary from vegetable to vegetable depending on whether it has a proper label for it. But some of the listed chemicals here, the trade names, you got Terrazol, you got Banrot, Subdue Max. There are products out there. Remember to rotate those frat codes as well. And we have some really good spray plans in place already. So if you do want to decide to go that way, if you've had a Pythium problem and you want a good spray program, contact your local extension agent. They'll help you figure out a good plan that's been tested by the university, and we'll keep those products rotating so that you don't develop resistance.
Yes, that is a key thing. That's really important to remember, because you don't want to deal with resistance. So there's a whole list of these products, and again, you need to make sure that you know what steps you need to take to keep things safe in your area, but also recognize that things you use outdoors are not good for indoors. Not always, right? So you have to have different safety steps. But this newsletter is specifically designed for those of you growing indoors, and it gives you a little bit more of a narrow look at what products are out there that you can use.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to powdery mildew.
Yeah, that stuff's nasty, and everybody's seen it.
Oh, so frustrating. Powdery mildew can be really devastating if you don't catch it early. Commonly affected crops would be your lettuce, your rosemary, your sage, your mint. I know my sage just attracts powdery mildew like nobody's business, and it is so frustrating. What you're looking for is that gray-white powdery growth on the upper leaf surfaces. Now remember, we're not talking about downy mildew, which has that fuzzy growth on the lower leaf surface. You want to look at the upper leaf surface, and you're looking at a gray or white powder, and sometimes it can be on the stems, the flowers.
Yes, and a lot of the leafy crops are going to have it, and things that have large leaves, like powdery mildew is a beast in pumpkins and cucurbits, but we're talking about the indoor setting here. So lettuce, rosemary, sage, mint, those are all susceptible to powdery mildew.
It's also really bad on dogwood trees, but we're not talking about that right now.
And yeah, but that could keep the disease pressure high in an area that you're growing something that you don't want to get the disease. So it's always good to watch that. That is a good point. And that's something that you should think about every once in a while.
So sanitation and cultural control measures for powdery mildew, you want to obviously remove any infected plants. When you're in an indoor growing condition, this is the easiest thing to do because you don't want it to spread. So when you're removing them, make sure you're bagging them up carefully, that you're not releasing any fungal spores into the air. But also, if you have really humid nights and really dry days, you want to make sure that your vents are running, that you're using heating to control that humidity, especially when you're winter growing. There's a lot more moisture in the air. Inside your high tunnel, it just collects in there. So you want to make sure you're monitoring your humidity levels. And I'll always recommend getting a humidity monitor or a humidity alarm for your high tunnel, because it can build up and you won't really notice the difference, sort of like that frog being in the pot of the water slowly increasing, or the temperature of the water slowly increasing. So you want to make sure that you get a humidity monitor and you keep track of that. But also air movement, making sure you have fans. I see a lot of high tunnel growers forego installing fans until they have a really devastating time with a particular disease, and it's just like, then they put the fans in. Let's get the fans in first so that you have good ventilation and good air movement so that you can avoid that. And then always, one of the greatest steps in integrated pest management is just choosing a cultivar that is more resistant to the disease you're having a problem with. So if you know that you have problems with powdery mildew in your tunnel or in your greenhouse, try to get a variety, a cultivar that is more resistant to powdery mildew.
That's right. And there are plenty of fungicides that have targeted powdery mildew, both for the indoor and the outdoor. But some of those products are Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus...
Let's just go with Triathlon BA, the trade name for it. Now, we're not advocating any trade names. We're just it's just sometimes easier to pronounce than the actual scientific name of the fungal impactor.
That's right. Potassium bicarbonate's another one, streptomyces, and a lot of those are biologicals. But there is a product that's kind of newer that we just learned from our pesticide recertification classes here, the Pyriophenone. It has frat code 50, so it's kind of a newer frat code. Apparently, it has very good, excellent preventative and curative activity, both for commercial greenhouses and nurseries. It's a foliar spray, and there is a 4-day REI. So, if you find yourself using the same product over and over again with less and less efficiency, then maybe changing that frat code would give you a lot better results.
For the new listeners, could you define FRAC code?
The FRAC code is the mode of action that plant utilizes that chemical. So it's the way that chemical works in that plant. So if you're attacking it the same way every time, eventually develop resistance as surviving, basically reproduce further and further and further down the road. So that chemical is less and less efficient because you're attacking it the same way. By altering that code, the mode that you're attacking that plant or insect or whatever, it gives less of a time for that population to adapt to it, so that subsequent generations are going to be susceptible to the new way of killing it. You're not favoring one thing every time. It's kind of a complicated biology program here, but
what the takeaway for our listeners is make sure that you're not using the same fungicide or pesticide or insecticide, for that matter, over and over and over again. Talk to your extension office, get a list of the different codes, and try to mix it up. We have lists we can print out for you where you can see the different frat codes of different chemicals. So keep that, post it on the wall or something like that, so you have a plan of how you're going to rotate these different chemicals. And at the very least, if you're a home gardener, have 2 different things on hand that you can rotate. Use this one twice and use that one twice, and just give you at least a little bit of variety in your control method.
And you know what? You don't have to develop this plan yourself. These plans are laid out. Just about every extension office has plans for just about everything. So please, utilize and those spray programs are typically they have a lot of variability. So you'll be able to choose something that works for you. You'll look at your REIs, you'll look at the cost, how often you spray, and all these things go into effect when you're looking at a good spray program. Because obviously, not everybody's going to have the same resources and be able to do things the same way. Depending on what you're growing, you might be limited, and depending where you are, you might be limited. So
Yeah, and if you're going for that organic certification, you're super limited. So, but a lot of these are organic certified. Just make sure you always check with your organic certifier before you use any new chemical in your production system. All right, let's move on. Botrytis or gray mold, that's another one that can really just wreck your day when you find it. It's going to be on your lettuce, your rosemary. A lot of the herbs are susceptible to this, but you're going to start seeing fuzzy gray or brown growth when it's humid. And you'll also get that soft rot on the stem and the older leaves. So you'll see it like right up close, and it really just ruins the salability of your plant. And the plant may eventually wilt and die.
Sanitation and controls, remove dead plant material, and that should go with everything. Anything that's really diseased or dead, get it out of the way. We always talk about not composting that stuff. Control humidity, avoid moisture on plant surfaces. So drip irrigate, don't overhead irrigate. Ensure good air movement. So those fans that you're talking about, Karen, both horizontal and vertical airflow. So the drier you can keep a plant, the better.
Yeah, and I do want to say, when you're looking at disposing that dead plant material, if they're in like little starter trays, just get rid of all of it. You want to sanitize your starter trays, and if you have a soil sanitizer, you can reuse that soil. If not, just get rid of it, because you're going to cause yourself more problems than it's worth to save that amount of soil, however much you're starting with. The soil sanitizers are really, there's steam sanitizers where you can just put it in a bin, run the steam through it. It sanitizes the soil. It gets rid of a lot of the problem, but for a smaller farm, it's not as feasible because they're a little bit more expensive than what a small farm would want to put into it. But if you're a larger farm, you may want to look into a steam sterilizer for your starting soil.
Again, that's one of those things that not everybody can do, but typically controlling moisture levels is something everybody can do.
Yes. And just some preventative fungicides for botrytis. You're looking at Bacillus. Okay, we're going back to triathlon because
Bacillus products. I mean, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of Bacillus products.
Yeah. It's not the Bacillus thuringiensis, though, that you're used to using for caterpillars. This is a different Bacillus. It is a soil-borne fungus, but it is not caterpillar focused. It is fungal focused, right? So potassium bicarbonate, Bacillus subtilis, or cease companion is another trade name. You're also looking at potentially some streptomyces if you need it.
Yes, and there are newer products out there, and here I have one, Avalo 400. It's a broad spectrum, frat code 3, and it's rated different for different diseases. When you're looking at these broad spectrum, you have to kind of understand what diseases you're trying to combat, and if you can get marginal protection in certain other things, you can kind of balance that and put that in your spray program. But you can see this one has a different frat code. And then for gray mold, at least in peonies, in this 2021 greenhouse trial that they looked at, it was satisfactory. So there are products out there, and there are ratings out there that universities are doing. So it'll give you an idea of how well something will work. So for gray mold, this product, which again is Avalo, gave you a satisfactory rating on that.
So we a lot of times talk about downy mildew when it comes to cucumbers, but downy mildew can impact your basil and your arugula as well as your cucurbits. So downy mildew can be really frustrating, but it does look a little bit different on your basil. So you're going to have a sporulation of like a dark, dirty, gray, fuzzy stuff. The upper part of the leaf is going to be yellowed in between major veins. That's one of the characteristics you can use to identify it. You might start to see some black spots on the upper part of the leaves, but really underside of that leaf, you're looking at the gray sporulation and the yellowing that stops in between the veins.
Yeah, and at least that part of it's kind of similar to what you see in most cucurbits as well. It's kind of like that fuzzy on the underneath side, and those sectorings, right? So it's like that yellow sector that you were talking about. So, and some sanitation things that you can do to control that. Again, make sure you're getting stuff that's clean, that's healthy. Always pick varieties that are more resistant, and you can find that typically in most catalogs. Most reputable nurseries will have a list of things of diseases that these have been that they've undergone trials, and they know what's resistant to what. And if you know that your area is more prone to downy mildew, that's what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Keep plants lit during the night or extended in the daytime. That's a new one.
Yeah, this is an exciting one for me. I thought this was really neat to learn.
Yeah, and I guess that helps with the sporulation from actually contaminating the plant. So that's interesting.
Yes, especially if you're winter growing and you have longer nights, the pathogen needs at least 7 hours of darkness to sporulate. So if you can get lighting in there so that you have less than 7 hours of night, then you're going to reduce your potential for that disease spreading through your crops.
And preventative fungicides here, potassium salts, phosphorus acids.
I'm just going to throw out a couple names because we're running out of time here. And again, we're not advocating one name or the other, just for ease of use. Phosphite, Ranman, Rivas, Oxidate, Triathlon, neem oil, Millstop, and Actinovate. So those are all options. But again, on this alert, and if you want a copy of it, just contact us or contact e-grow.org and you can get a copy of this. It's a really great write-up. All right, I think we have time for one last one, and that is Scleretina blight or white mold. And this one is the icky one.
Yes, that one, it looks like something died on this plant. It basically, it melts like ice cream.
So you're going to start to see that water soaking. The leaves just kind of melt. It's really gross and slimy. It's a watery, soft rot. You'll start to see that white cottony mycelium under really humid and moist conditions. And it's just that one where you go to pick it and your hand just sinks in and you're like, oh, I didn't want to touch that.
And it obviously, sanitation's always the same.
Mm-hmm.
You want good airflow. You don't want to overwater and keep that moisture level down.
Yeah, and start with clean and sanitized materials, liners, plants, everything. Avoid using outdoor soil or transplanting from outdoors into an indoor area. That's a great way to bring in contaminated materials. So I usually do not advise starting plants in garden soil unless they're going back into the garden. If you're going to start it and grow it indoors, it needs to have sanitized soil. Real quickly, triathlon, double nickel, Cease Companion, Actinovate. Those are all preventative. I'm going to stress that again, preventative fungicides. And there are more, but we are out of time, so we're not going to have a chance to do that. Again, I want to support www.e-gro.org. It's a great newsletter, a great blog that they have, a lot of great minds going into that information. So if you are growing indoors or undercover, I do highly suggest subscribing to this newsletter.
Yeah. Keep you up to date on all the new diseases coming out too.
Yes,
so
it
you
is
can
great.
stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, and for flower producers too, it's anything that you grow indoors. It's besides livestock. So anyway, all thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.